A waitress gives soup to a soaking veteran standing in the rain. He thanks her, salutes, disappears into the storm. The next morning, a phone call shatters everything. Your father passed away last night. It's his daughter, crying, thanking her. You gave me my dad back. He called me for the first time in 8 years, all because of you. 1 week later, a mysterious letter arrives. Inside, a deed to a building in Knoxville, paid in full, left to her. This veteran who looked homeless? He wasn't broke. He'd been saving his late wife's inheritance for years, waiting, watching, looking for someone worthy. And he chose a waitress who gave him soup. What happens next will restore your faith in humanity, but only if you stay until the very end. Drop a comment. Have you ever helped a stranger without knowing the impact? The sky split open over Lexington, Kentucky, at 9:47 p.m. Rain didn't just fall, it attacked. Thick, angry sheets hammered the asphalt of Old Frankfort Pike, turning the road into a river of headlights and brake lights. Thunder rolled low and mean, shaking the earth beneath. Most people were inside by now. Safe, warm, smart. But not everyone had that option. Through the downpour, a single neon sign flickered to life, red cursive letters bleeding into the storm. Marley's Diner. The kind of place you pass 100 times and never notice. Cracked vinyl booths, chipped formica counters, coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since lunch. But tonight, it was the only light for miles. Inside, the air smelled like grease, burnt toast, and something sweet, maybe pie, maybe regret. Danielle Brooks moved between tables like a ghost, 30 years old, hair pulled back tight, eyes that had seen too many double shifts and not enough sleep. She refilled ketchup bottles in silence, her hands working on muscle memory alone. The diner was nearly empty. A truck driver nursed his third cup of coffee in the corner booth. An older couple picked at their fries without talking. Nobody looked up. Nobody ever did. Danny wiped down the counter for the 4th time that hour, her reflection barely visible in the streaked chrome napkin holder. She didn't mind the quiet. Quiet meant no problems. Quiet meant she could think about her mom's medical bills without someone asking if she was okay. She wasn't okay, but she was still standing. That had to count for something. Outside, the rain pounded harder. Then she saw him. A figure stood beneath the broken streetlight across the road, still as stone, soaked to the bone. An old man, maybe 70, gripping a faded green duffel bag like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring at nothing. Danny froze mid-wipe. The truck driver didn't look up. The couple kept chewing. The cook in the back didn't care. But she did. Her chest tightened. That feeling, the one she hated and loved at the same time. The one that always got her into trouble. Not your problem, Danny. Not tonight. She turned back to the counter. The rain screamed against the windows. She glanced again. He was still there, shivering now, alone in the storm, forgotten by the world around him. Her hand moved to the door handle before her brain caught up. And in that split second between safety and risk, between ignoring and acting, everything changed. She just didn't know it yet. If you've ever seen someone suffering and walked away, you'll understand what happens next. Subscribe so you never have to. Danielle Brooks wasn't supposed to be working tonight. Her shift ended at 7. But when Tracy called in sick again, Danny didn't hesitate. She grabbed her apron, tied her hair back tighter, and told herself it was just a few more hours, a few more dollars, a few more steps closer to paying off her mother's oxygen tank rental. That's how it always went. She'd been at Marley's since she was 17, 13 years of grease stains, sore feet, and customers who never remembered her name. Some weeks, she worked 60 hours, some weeks more. The owner, Cal Bradshaw, didn't ask questions. He just nodded when she clocked in early and left late. Danny preferred it that way. Work meant distraction. Work meant purpose. Work meant she didn't have to sit alone in her one-bedroom apartment on Versailles Road and think about everything she couldn't fix. Her mom, Lorraine, lived 3 hours south in Corbin, COPD, stage 3, getting worse every month. Danny sent money when she could, visited when she couldn't. The bills kept piling up faster than her paychecks could cover them. But she never complained, not once. That wasn't who she was. She'd learned early that the world didn't reward softness, it punished it. So she stayed quiet, worked hard, helped when she could, asked for nothing in return. People liked Danny, sort of. She was dependable, polite, the kind of person you'd trust to water your plants but forget to invite to your birthday party. Invisible in all the ways that mattered. Tonight was no different. The couple in booth 4 didn't say thank you when she refilled their water. The truck driver left a $1.50 tip on a $12 check. The cook, Reuben, barely grunted when she asked if the apple pie was fresh. Danny wiped her hands on her apron and kept moving. She was used to it. But something felt different tonight. Heavier. The storm outside wasn't letting up. The thunder rattled the windows every few minutes like the sky itself was angry. And that man still out there, drenched and shaking under the broken streetlight, he hadn't moved. Danny glanced toward the door. Her pulse quickened. Why isn't anyone else seeing this? The couple paid their bill and left without a word. The truck driver scrolled his phone. Reuben scraped the grill in the back. It was just her, and him, and a choice she didn't want to make. She grabbed a spare umbrella from behind the counter, black, bent from too many storms, and felt her heartbeat in her throat. "What are you doing, Danny?" She didn't know, but her feet were already moving toward the door. Ever notice how the people who help the most are the ones who have the least? Drop a comment if you've ever been that person. The door fought her. Wind slammed against it the second Danny pushed, nearly knocking her back inside. Rain hit her face like cold needles. The umbrella snapped open above her head, already bending under the weight of the storm. She stepped onto the sidewalk, water soaking through her sneakers instantly. The old man was maybe 20 feet away. Closer now, she could see more. His jacket, army green, faded, patched at the elbows, clung to his frame like wet paper. His duffel bag sagged in his grip, heavy with rain. His face was weathered, carved deep with lines that told stories she'd never hear. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Empty, distant, like he'd been standing there long before the storm started, like he'd keep standing there long after it ended. "Sir?" Her voice barely carried over the rain. He didn't move. She stepped closer, holding the umbrella higher. "Sir, are you okay?" His head turned slowly. For a moment, he just stared at her. Not with suspicion, not with gratitude, just surprise. Like he'd forgotten, people could see him. "I'm fine," he said quietly. His voice was rough, scratched raw by too many years of something she couldn't name. "You're soaked," Danny said, louder now. "Come inside, please." He shook his head. "Don't want to be a bother." "You're not. I'll wait for the next bus." "In this?" She gestured at the storm around them. "You'll catch pneumonia before it gets here." He hesitated. His fingers tightened around the duffel strap. She saw it then, the slight tremor in his hands. Not from the cold. Something deeper. Danny moved the umbrella over his head, letting the rain hammer her shoulder instead. "Just until the storm passes," she said softly. "You don't have to stay long, but you can't stay out here." For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, slowly, he nodded. She walked him back across the street, her sneakers squelching with every step. The neon sign buzzed above them as she pushed the door open again. Warmth spilled out, wrapping around them like a blanket. Inside, the truck driver glanced up, then back down at his phone. The cook didn't even look. Nobody cared. Danny led the old man to the booth nearest the heater, cracked red vinyl, duct tape holding one corner together. He sat down slowly, like his bones hurt. The duffel bag thudded beside him, dripping onto the floor. She grabbed a clean towel from behind the counter and set it in front of him. "I'll get you some coffee," she said. He looked up at her, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Gratitude, relief, maybe even hope. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded and turned toward the coffee pot, her heart pounding harder than it should. The coffee was old, probably sitting since the dinner rush, but Danny poured it anyway. She grabbed the pot of vegetable soup from the warmer, ladled a generous bowl, and added 2 thick slices of buttered bread on the side. She didn't ask Reuben, didn't check with Cal, just did it. When she set the tray down in front of the old man, his eyes widened slightly. "I didn't order." "On the house," Danny said quietly. He stared at the soup like it was something foreign, something he didn't deserve. "I can't." "You can," she interrupted gently. "It's just soup." It wasn't just soup. They both knew that, but neither said it out loud. He wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. His fingers trembled against the ceramic, subtle, but unmistakable. Not from the cold, from something older, deeper. Danny pretended not to notice. "I'm Walter," he said after a moment. His voice was steadier now. "Walter Hensley. Most folks call me Walt." "Danny," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "You from around here?" He shook his head. "Passing through. Had an appointment at the VA hospital over on Leestown Road. Missed my bus back to Corbin." Corbin. The same town her mother lived in. Small world. "Long ride," Danny said. "Yeah." He sipped the coffee slowly, savoring it. "Doesn't help when your knees don't work like they used to." She noticed the way he sat, one leg stretched out stiffly under the table. An old injury, maybe, or just age catching up. "Vietnam?" she asked, nodding toward the small patch on his jacket, faded eagle, wings spread. Walt nodded. "Long time ago. Feels like someone else's life now." The soup steamed between them. He picked up the spoon, hands still shaking, and took a careful bite. His eyes closed for just a second. Relief, warmth, something close to comfort. "This is good," he said quietly. "Reuben's recipe," Danny replied. "He won't admit it, but he's proud of that soup." Walt smiled, small, barely there, but real. She should have walked away, refilled the truck driver's coffee, cleared the empty tables, but something kept her standing there. Maybe it was the way he held that spoon. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, like he'd been invisible for so long he forgot what it felt like to be seen. "Take your time," Danny said softly. "No rush." He looked up at her, and this time his smile reached his eyes. "You're kind," he said. "World needs more of that." Danny didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and stepped back behind the counter. But her hands were shaking now too. Walt ate slowly, each spoonful deliberate, like he was trying to make it last. Danny busied herself wiping down the counter, but she stayed close. Something told her he needed the company more than the soup. "You live in Corbin?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Small place outside it," Walt said. "Got a trailer off Route 25. Nothing fancy. Just me and a lot of quiet." Quiet's not always bad. He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "No, but it gets loud after a while." She didn't understand, but she felt it. The weight behind his words. Walt set the spoon down and wrapped both hands around the coffee mug again. The tremor was still there, faint, persistent. "You married?" he asked suddenly. Danny shook her head. "No time for that. Work keeps me busy." "That's what I used to say." His gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked window. Then one day I looked up and 40 years had passed. The diner felt smaller suddenly, quieter. "I had a wife," Walt continued, his voice softer now. "Her name was Evelyn. Met her at a county fair in Barberville back in '71. She was wearing this yellow dress, looked like sunshine in the middle of all that dust and noise." Danny stopped wiping. She just listened. "We got married 6 months later. I was still trying to figure out who I was after coming back from Da Nang. She didn't care. Loved me anyway." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "She passed in 2015. Heart gave out while she was gardening. Didn't even get to say goodbye." "I'm sorry," Danny whispered. Walt nodded slowly. "Me too." The rain drummed against the roof, steady, unrelenting. "She used to say I needed to talk more," he said. "Said I kept everything locked up too tight. Guess she was right." He took a long sip of coffee. "Funny how you don't realize someone's holding you together until they're gone." Danny felt a lump rising in her throat. She thought about her mom, about all the phone calls she meant to make but didn't. All the visits she postponed because of work. You got family now? She asked carefully. Walt's jaw tightened. Just a flicker, but she saw it. A daughter, he said finally. Haven't spoken to her in years. Why not? He stared into his coffee like the answer was somewhere at the bottom of the cup. Because I wasn't the father she needed, and by the time I figured that out, it was too late to fix it. The diner felt heavier now, like the storm outside had seeped through the walls. Danny wanted to say something, anything, but sometimes silence was kinder than words. The truck driver finally left, tossing a few crumpled bills on the counter without a word. The bell above the door chimed as he disappeared into the rain. Now it was just Danny, Walt, and Reuben scraping the grill in the back. She refilled Walt's coffee without asking. He nodded his thanks. What's her name? Danny asked quietly. Your daughter. Walt exhaled slowly. Sarah. Lives in Knoxville now. Works at some marketing firm. Married a good man, from what I hear. Has a little boy I've never met. The pain in his voice was subtle, buried beneath years of practice hiding it. You could call her, Danny said gently. Could, Walt agreed. But what would I say? Sorry I wasn't there when you graduated? Sorry I missed your wedding? Sorry I chose silence over showing up? He shook his head. Some apologies come too late. She's better off without me dragging up old ghosts. Danny leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You don't know that. I know enough. He stared at the steam rising from his cup. After Evelyn died, Sarah reached out. Called me every week for 2 months. I didn't answer. Not once. Why? Because I didn't know how to be a person without Evelyn. She was the glue, the translator. She made me softer. His voice cracked slightly. Without her, I'm just an old man who doesn't know how to say what he feels. Danny's chest tightened. She thought about her own silences, the conversations she avoided with her mom because talking about medical bills felt too heavy, too real. My mom's sick, Danny said suddenly. She didn't know why she said it, maybe because he'd been honest first. Walt looked up. Copty, she continued, stage 3, lives down in Corbin. I send money when I can, visit when I can't. She laughed bitterly. Which isn't often. You're doing your best. Am I? Danny's voice wavered. Because it never feels like enough. Walt was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my daughter used to tell me the same thing, that I never gave enough, and she was right. He set his mug down carefully. But you, he looked at her, really looked at her, you're still here, still trying. That's more than I ever did. Danny blinked hard, fighting the sting behind her eyes. You remind me of Evelyn, Walt said softly. Same eyes, same patience, same way of making people feel like they matter. She didn't trust herself to speak, so she just nodded and turned away before he could see her tears. Danny wiped her eyes quickly, pretending to check the coffee filters behind the counter. When she turned back, Walt was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, something gentler. I mean it, he said. You really do remind me of her. Danny forced a small smile. I'm sure your wife was a lot more put together than I am. No. Walt shook his head slowly. Evelyn was a mess half the time. Burned dinner, forgot appointments, cried at commercials. His eyes softened. But she had this way of seeing people, really seeing them, like you did tonight. Danny shifted uncomfortably. I just brought you soup. You brought me dignity, Walt corrected quietly. There's a difference. The words hit harder than she expected. She thought about all the people who walked past her every day, the customers who snapped their fingers for refills, the ones who left pocket change as tips, the ones who looked right through her like she was part of the furniture. Nobody ever said she gave them dignity. Evelyn used to do that too, Walt continued. Stop for people nobody else noticed. Stray dogs, homeless vets outside the grocery store, kids sitting alone at the park. He smiled faintly. Drove me crazy sometimes. I'd say, we can't save everyone, Evie. And she'd say, no, but we can save someone. Donnie's throat tightened again. She sounds like a good person. The best. Walt's voice dropped. I didn't deserve her. Spent 20 years trying to figure out how to be the man she thought I was. He paused. Never quite got there. I think you're being too hard on yourself. Maybe. He stared at his hands, those trembling, weathered hands. But when you lose someone like that, you start seeing all the ways you failed them, all the moments you took for granted. The diner was so quiet now, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft patter of rain. Danny leaned against the counter, arms folded. What would she say if she saw you now? She asked softly. Walt thought for a long time. She'd tell me to call Sarah. His voice cracked. She'd tell me it's never too late to try. Then maybe you should. He looked up at her, eyes glassy but steady. Maybe I will. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just two strangers holding space for each other's pain. And somehow, that felt like enough. Have you ever met someone for 5 minutes and felt like you've known them forever? Comment below. The rain softened around midnight. Not gone, just quieter. Like the storm had said what it needed to say and was finally letting go. Walt checked the old watch on his wrist, scratched face, leather band worn thin. Last bus comes through at 12:30, he said. I should head to the stop. Danny glanced at the clock above the register. 20 minutes. Let me pack you something, she said before he could protest. She moved quickly, grabbing a to-go container, layering in a turkey sandwich with extra pickles, a handful of chips, and a thick slice of pecan pie that Reuben had made fresh that morning. Walt stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table, as his stiff legs straightened beneath him. He reached for his wallet, a battered leather billfold held together with a rubber band. How much do I? Nothing, Danny said firmly, handing him the container. You don't owe me anything. I owe you more than you know. She shook her head. You already did your part for this country, Mr. Hensley. Let someone else carry the weight for once. His eyes softened. For a moment, he just stood there, holding the container like it was something precious. You're going to make someone very happy one day, he said quietly. Danny smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll settle for making it through tomorrow's shift. Walt chuckled soft, raspy, genuine. He slung the duffel over his shoulder, wincing slightly as the strap settled against old muscle. Danny walked him to the door, holding it open as the cool night air rushed in. The rain had slowed to a drizzle now. Streetlights reflected in shallow puddles along the road. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Walt turned back to her one last time. And then he did something she didn't expect. He stood a little straighter, lifted his right hand, and saluted crisp, clean, deliberate. Danny froze. Thank you, he said, for seeing me. Her throat closed up. She nodded quickly, blinking hard. Walt turned and walked into the rain, his silhouette fading beneath the glow of the streetlights. The duffel bag swayed with each step. His limp was more pronounced now, but he didn't stop. Danny stood in the doorway long after he disappeared. She didn't know why, but something about that moment felt final, like a door closing softly, like the end of something she didn't know had started. She stepped back inside, locked the door, and wiped her eyes. Outside, the rain picked up again. If you've ever said goodbye to someone and didn't know it was the last time, keep watching. Morning came too fast. Danny woke to her alarm at 5:47 a.m., same as always. Her apartment on Versailles Road was small and dim, curtains drawn against the early light. She showered, tied her hair back, and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror for longer than usual. She looked tired, felt it too. By 6:30, she was back at Marley's, unlocking the front door as the first hint of sunrise bled through the clouds. The storm had passed. Everything outside looked clean, washed. Inside, the diner smelled like stale coffee and floor cleaner. Reuben arrived at 7, grunting his usual greeting. Cal came in around 8, checked the register, and disappeared into the back office without a word. The morning rush was slow. A handful of regulars, a couple truckers passing through, a mom with 2 kids who spilled orange juice all over booth 3. Danny cleaned it up without complaint. Everything felt normal, routine, like last night never happened. But it had. She kept thinking about Walt, the way he saluted her, the tremble in his hands. The story about his daughter he couldn't bring himself to call. She wondered if he made it home okay. If he was sitting in that trailer off Route 25, staring at his phone, thinking about Sarah in Knoxville. She wondered if he'd actually call her. Around 10, Danny refilled the sugar jars, same ones she'd been filling when she first saw him standing in the rain. She paused mid-pour, staring out the window at the empty street. The broken streetlight was still broken. The puddles had dried up. Everything looked exactly the same. But something felt different. She couldn't explain it, just a quiet shift, like the air had changed weight. "You good?" Reuben called from the kitchen. "Yeah," Danny replied, "just tired." She finished the sugar jars and moved on to wiping down the counter. The same counter she'd leaned against while Walt told her about Evelyn, about regret, about all the things he wished he'd said. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from her mom. "How are you, baby? Haven't heard from you in a few days." Danny stared at the message. She almost typed back the usual, "I'm fine, busy, I'll call soon." But she didn't. Instead, she hit the call button. Her mom answered on the second ring. "Danny?" "Hey, Mama," Danny said softly. "Just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause, then her mother's voice, warm and surprised. "Well, this is a nice surprise." Danny smiled. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. Something's about to change everything. Subscribe now before you miss what happens next. The call came the next afternoon. Danny was wiping down booth 5 when the landline rang sharp and piercing above the low hum of the diner. "Marley's Diner," she answered, tucking the phone between her shoulder and ear. Silence. Then a woman's voice, soft, trembling. "Is this Danielle Brooks?" Danny straightened. "Yes, can I help you?" Another pause. Longer this time. Like the person on the other end was gathering courage. "My name is Sarah Hensley," the woman's voice cracked. I'm Walter Hensley's daughter." Danny's stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" she asked quickly. "Did something happen?" Sarah inhaled shakily. "He passed away last night, in his sleep." The diner tilted. Danny gripped the counter, her knuckles going white. "What?" "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "I know this must be shocking, but I had to call you. I had to tell you." Danny's breath came shallow. Her mind raced back to 2 nights ago, Walt standing in the rain, trembling hands wrapped around coffee, the salute before he disappeared into the night. "I don't understand," Danny said quietly. "Why are you calling me?" Sarah's voice broke. "Because my dad called me, Thursday night, after he got home." Danny's heart pounded. "We hadn't spoken in 8 years, Sarah continued, tears thick in her voice. 8 years of silence. And then, out of nowhere, he called. Said he met someone at a diner. Someone who reminded him of my mom. Someone who made him feel seen." Danny's vision blurred. "He told me about you," Sarah said. "About the soup, the coffee, the way you listened without judging. He said you gave him something he'd forgotten he needed." Danny's voice cracked. "I just brought him food." "No." Sarah's tone was firm despite the tears. "You gave him hope, enough hope to pick up the phone and call me. We talked for 3 hours. 3 hours. We cried. We laughed. We said things we should have said years ago." Danny pressed her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "He told me he loved me," Sarah whispered. "For the first time in a decade, my dad told me he loved me, and then he went to bed. And he didn't wake up." The silence that followed was unbearable. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said softly. "You gave me my dad back. Even if it was just for one night. You gave me closure I didn't think I'd ever get." Danny couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Thank you," Sarah whispered again. Then the line went dead. Danny stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone. Her hand shook as she lowered the receiver back onto its cradle. The diner blurred around her, sounds muffled, shapes soft at the edges. Someone was talking. Maybe Reuben, maybe a customer. She couldn't tell. All she could hear was Sarah's voice. "You gave me my dad back." Her knees buckled. She stumbled toward the back hallway, past the kitchen, past the supply closet, into the cramped break room that smelled like burnt microwave popcorn and old coffee. The door swung shut behind her, and then she broke. Sobs tore through her chest, raw, uncontrollable. She sank onto the vinyl couch, pressing her palms against her eyes, trying to hold it together. But she couldn't. Walt was dead. The man she'd shared soup with 2 nights ago. The man who saluted her in the rain. The man who called his daughter for the first time in 8 years because of a bowl of soup and a kind word. Gone. She didn't even know him, not really. Just 1 hour, one conversation, one small act of kindness. And now, he was gone. The door creaked open. Tracy, the other waitress, poked her head in. "Danny, you okay?" Danny shook her head, unable to speak. Tracy stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. She sat down beside Danny, not saying anything at first, just sitting, being present. "Someone died," Danny finally whispered. "A customer?" Danny nodded. "The old man, from Thursday night, the one in the rain." Tracy's face softened. "Oh, honey. His daughter just called." Danny's voice cracked. "She said he called her after he left here. First time in 8 years. They talked all night. And then he—" She couldn't finish. Tracy wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "He told her I reminded him of his wife," Danny said through tears, "that I made him want to make things right." "Then you did something beautiful," Tracy said quietly. "But he's dead." "Yeah, but he didn't die alone, not emotionally. You gave him peace, Danny. That's not nothing." Danny wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. Peace. Was that what it was? She thought about Walt's trembling hands, his quiet regret, the way he looked at her like she mattered. Maybe Tracy was right. Maybe peace was enough. But it didn't make the grief any lighter. She sat there in the break room, crying for a man she barely knew. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Danny stayed in the break room for 20 minutes. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red and swollen, mascara smudged, despite her best efforts to clean it off. Her apron was wrinkled from clutching it too hard. The lunch rush was starting. Booth 2 needed refills. Table 6 was waiting for their check. The coffee pot was running low. But when she stepped behind the counter, Reuben looked up from the grill and just nodded. "Take your time," he said quietly. Danny blinked. Reuben never said things like that. Tracy was already handling the tables, moving quickly between customers with the kind of efficiency that came from years of practice. She caught Danny's eye and smiled, small, reassuring. Cal emerged from the back office, paused when he saw her face, and didn't say a word. Just squeezed her shoulder once before heading to the register. They knew. Somehow, without her saying much, they understood. Danny poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, the same window she'd looked through 2 nights ago when she first saw Walt standing in the rain. The streetlight was still broken, the curb still cracked, but the spot where he'd stood felt different now, empty in a way that hurt. A customer at the counter cleared his throat, trying to get her attention. "Coffee?" he asked impatiently. Danny turned, grabbed the pot, and refilled his cup without a word. Her hands were steadier now, her breathing slower. She moved through the rest of her shift on autopilot, refilling, wiping, smiling when expected. But her mind was somewhere else. She kept replaying Sarah's words. "You gave me my dad back." 3 hours. Walt and Sarah had talked for 3 hours. About what? Old memories? New apologies? All the years they lost? Danny would never know. But she knew it mattered. She knew that one night, one single conversation between a father and daughter had been worth something. And it started with soup, and coffee, and a stranger who refused to look away. Around 4 p.m., the diner finally quieted. Danny leaned against the counter, staring at the empty booth where Walt had Saturday. The vinyl was still cracked, the duct tape still peeling. But in her mind, she could still see him there, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes soft with gratitude, voice rough with regret. "You okay?" Tracy asked, appearing beside her. Danny nodded slowly. Yeah, I think so. You did a good thing, you know. I know. Danny's voice was barely a whisper. I just wish I could have done more. Tracy squeezed her hand. Sometimes, she said gently, more isn't possible. Sometimes enough is all we get. A week passed. 7 days of rain, routine, and trying not to think about Walt every time she poured coffee for an elderly man. Danny didn't go to the funeral. She didn't know when it was. Didn't know if she'd even be welcome. She was just the waitress who gave him soup, nothing more. At least, that's what she told herself. Friday afternoon, the mail carrier walked into Marley's carrying a thick manila envelope. "Danielle Brooks?" he asked, checking the label. Danny looked up from refilling napkin dispensers. "That's me. Need you to sign for this." She wiped her hands on her apron and scribbled her name on the clipboard. The envelope was heavier than she expected, stiff, official-looking. Her name was handwritten across the front in careful, shaky cursive. She turned it over. No return address, just a postmark from Corbin. Her heart skipped. She waited until her break, retreating to the back room before opening it. Her fingers trembled as she tore the seal. Inside was a single folded letter, cream-colored paper, slightly yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was the same as the envelope. Slow, deliberate, the kind of penmanship that came from another generation. She unfolded it carefully. "Miss Brooks, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. Don't be sad. I made my peace. I've been thinking about what you said, that it's never too late. You were right. I called Sarah. We talked, really talked. For the first time in years, I felt like a father again. That was because of you. I don't have much to leave behind. No fortune, no grand legacy. But I do have something I want you to have. Kindness travels further than money ever will. I've arranged something in Knoxville for you. The address is on the second page. A lawyer named Griffin Oakes will meet you there. You fed me when I was hungry. You listened when I was invisible. You reminded me that people still care. Now let me return the favor. Walt." Danny stared at the letter, reading it twice, then 3 times. Her hands shook. She flipped to the second page. An address in Knoxville. A phone number for Griffin Oakes, attorney at law. Nothing else. No explanation. No details. Just an address and a promise. She sat there in the break room, holding the letter like it might disappear if she let go. What had he done? What could a man with nothing possibly leave her? And why her? Her phone buzzed, a text from her mom. But Danny didn't look at it. She just stared at the address, heart pounding, mind racing. Knoxville was 3 hours away. She had no idea what waited for her there. But she knew somehow. She knew her life was about to change. Danny requested Saturday off. Cal didn't ask why, just nodded and told her to be safe. She left Lexington at dawn, driving her old Honda Civic south on I-75. The highway stretched ahead, gray asphalt cutting through rolling hills, morning fog clinging to the valleys. She'd plugged the Knoxville address into her phone. 3 hours and 12 minutes. Plenty of time to overthink everything. The letter sat on the passenger seat, still folded carefully, like it might crumble if handled too roughly. She glanced at it every few minutes, half expecting it to vanish. What was Walt thinking? He said he had nothing. A trailer off Route 25, a duffel bag, a life spent carrying regret. So what could he possibly give her? The questions circled endlessly. She passed Berea, then Richmond. The landscape shifted, mountains rising in the distance, thick with trees just starting to turn gold and red. October in Tennessee was always beautiful, quiet, like the earth itself was taking a breath before winter. Danny's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She thought about Sarah, about that phone call, about the 3 hours Walt spent talking to his daughter before he went to sleep and never woke up. Did he know? Did he feel it coming? Or did he just go to bed grateful, finally at peace? Her throat tightened. She turned up the radio to drown out the thoughts. But nothing stuck, just noise. Around mile marker 188, she pulled off at a rest stop, grabbed a coffee from a vending machine, burnt and weak. But it was something to hold. Standing outside, staring at the mountains, she called her mom. "Hey, baby," Lorraine answered, voice raspy but warm. "Hey, Mama," Danny exhaled slowly. "I'm on my way to Knoxville." "Knoxville? What for?" Danny paused. She hadn't told her mom about Walt, hadn't told anyone except Tracy. "Just something I need to check on. I'll explain later." "You okay?" "Yeah." Danny's voice softened. "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. Then her mom said, "I love you, Danielle." "I love you too." She hung up and stood there a moment longer, letting the mountain air fill her lungs. Then she got back in the car and kept driving. An hour later, the Knoxville skyline appeared small but unmistakable against the hills. Her phone guided her off the interstate, through narrow streets lined with brick buildings and old storefronts. Left on Gay Street, right on Jackson Avenue. And then she saw it. A faded building near Old City Market. Boarded windows, peeling paint, a for sale sign half fallen in the dirt. Her heart sank. Subscribe now. What she finds inside will leave you speechless. Danny sat in her car, staring at the building. This couldn't be right. She checked the address again. 428 Jackson Avenue. Same number on the faded sign hanging crooked above the door. This was it. But why? A black sedan pulled up behind her. A man in a pressed suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He walked toward her car and tapped gently on the window. Danny rolled it down. "Miss Brooks?" he asked. She nodded, throat dry. "Griffin Oaks. We spoke on the phone." He extended his hand. She shook it, still confused. "I don't understand," Danny said. "What is this place?" Griffin glanced at the building, then back at her. "It used to be a diner, closed about 5 years ago when the owner passed. Mr. Hensley purchased it 2 years later." Danny's heart stopped. "Walt owned this?" "Yes, ma'am." Griffin pulled a folder from his briefcase. "He bought it outright, paid cash, never did anything with it, just held on to it." Her mind raced. Walt lived in a trailer, wore a patched jacket, carried everything he owned in a duffel bag. How did he have money for this? Griffin seemed to read her thoughts. "Mr. Hensley lived modestly by choice," he said gently. "His wife left him a small inheritance when she passed, life insurance. He didn't touch most of it, said he was saving it for something that mattered." Danny's vision blurred. Griffin opened the folder and pulled out a single document, cream-colored paper, official stamps along the border. A deed. He handed it to her. "Mr. Hensley left instructions with me 3 months ago. If anything happened to him, this property was to be transferred to you. No conditions, no strings, paid in full." Danny stared at the document, her name typed clearly in the center. Danielle Marie Brooks. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's real," Griffin said quietly. "He wanted you to have it, said you'd know what to do with it." Her hands trembled as she held the deed. "Why me?" Her voice cracked. "I only met him once." Griffin smiled softly. "He told me you reminded him of his wife, said you saw people the way she did, with kindness, without judgment." He paused. "He said the world needed more of that, and he wanted to make sure you could keep giving it." Danny couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Griffin gestured toward the building. "Would you like to see inside?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Together, they walked toward the door. The door creaked open on rusted hinges. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight streaming between the boarded windows. The air smelled old stale coffee, aged wood, and something faintly sweet, like grease that had settled into the walls decades ago. Danny stepped inside slowly, her footsteps echoing on cracked linoleum. The space was small, maybe 20 tables at most. A long counter ran along the back wall, stools still bolted to the floor, some tipped over, others missing seats entirely. The kitchen was visible through a pass-through window, old griddle, rusted hood vents, cabinets hanging open. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, forgotten, abandoned. But beneath it all, Danny could see what it used to be. a place where people gathered, where food was served, where someone cared enough to keep the lights on. Griffin stood near the door, giving her space. She moved deeper into the room, running her fingers along the counter. Dust came away in soft clouds. Beneath it, the formica was pale blue, chipped and stained, but still solid. On the far wall, a framed photograph hung crooked. She walked over, wiping the glass with her sleeve. A black and white image. A younger Walt, maybe 30, standing beside a woman in a yellow dress. She was smiling, eyes bright, one hand resting on his shoulder. He looked stiff, uncertain, but there was warmth in his expression. Evelyn. Danny's chest tightened. This was their dream. Walt bought this place for her, or maybe for both of them, a chance to start over, to build something together. But Evelyn died, and Walt couldn't do it alone. So he let it sit, empty, waiting, until now. Danny stared at the photograph, tears blurring the edges. "He told me once," Griffin said quietly from behind her, "that his wife always wanted to run a diner, said she loved feeding people, making them feel welcome." He paused. "He bought this place 2 months after she passed. I think he thought it would help him feel close to her." Danny wiped her eyes. "But he never opened it." "No, I think it hurt too much." She turned, looking around the dusty room again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just a building. It was a love letter, a promise unfulfilled, a dream deferred. And Walt gave it to her. "Why me?" she whispered again, though she wasn't sure who she was asking. Griffin stepped closer. Maybe because he saw what his wife would have seen, someone who could finish what they started. Danny's breath shook. She looked at the counter, the stools, the kitchen, and for the first time, she saw possibility. Danny didn't go back to Lexington that night. She found a cheap motel off Cumberland Avenue and lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. By morning, she'd made her decision. She called Cal, gave her 2 weeks' notice. He didn't argue, just said, "Good luck, kid." She called her mom, told her everything, Walt, the letter, the building, the deed. Lorraine was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your daddy would be proud." Danny cried. But this time, they were different tears. 2 weeks later, she moved into a tiny studio apartment in Knoxville. The building on Jackson Avenue became her entire world. She started small, scrubbing, sweeping, tearing down the boards covering the windows. Light flooded in for the first time in years, revealing just how much work needed to be done. The counter needed resurfacing. The kitchen needed new equipment. The floors were cracked and stained beyond saving. But Danny didn't quit. She posted about the project on a local community board. Within days, people showed up. A retired contractor named Leon Miller brought his tools and a crew of volunteers. They ripped out the old flooring, patched the walls, rewired the lights. A woman named Beverly Chen donated kitchen equipment from her recently closed bakery, a working griddle, industrial mixer, stacks of plates and mugs. A college kid named Tomas painted a mural on the back wall, rolling hills, a sunrise, and 2 figures standing side by side, one in a yellow dress. Donnie worked 16-hour days. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but every night, when she locked the door and stepped outside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. 3 weeks in, the diner started to look like a diner again. Fresh paint, soft cream walls, dark blue trim, new booths with clean vinyl, polished counters, a chalkboard menu hanging behind the register. Leon installed a small brass plaque beside the front door. Danny had it engraved with a single line, "In memory of Walter and Evelyn Hensley, who believed kindness could feed the world." She stood outside one evening, staring at the sign above the door. It was hand-painted, simple but bold. Donnie's table. Her chest swelled. This was real. This was happening. She thought about Walt, about the way he saluted her in the rain, about Evelyn, who never got to see this dream come true. But maybe, just maybe, they were watching now. She pulled out her phone and texted her mom. "We open next Saturday." Lorraine's reply came instantly. "I'll be there." When one act of kindness creates a legacy this powerful, You don't want to miss what happens next. Subscribe now. Opening day arrived on a crisp Saturday morning in late October. Danny unlocked the door at 6 a.m. sharp, hands trembling as she flipped the sign from closed to open. The sun was just rising over the old city market, casting golden light through the windows. Everything gleamed: polished counters, clean floors, the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the back. She'd hired 2 people to help: Beverly from the donated equipment, who insisted on working the kitchen, and Tomas, the mural painter, who needed weekend work between classes. By 6:30, the first customer walked in. An older man, veteran's cap, faded jacket. He stood in the doorway, uncertain. Danny smiled. "Come in, coffee's hot." He sat at the counter slowly, eyeing the menu board. "What do I owe you?" he asked after finishing his eggs and toast. Danny leaned on the counter. "You serve?" He nodded. "Marines, 2 tours. Then it's on the house." His eyes widened. "You serious?" "Every time." He stared at her for a long moment. Then his jaw tightened, and he nodded once. "Thank you." Word spread fast. By noon, the diner was packed. Veterans, truckers stopping between routes, families with kids, a group of college students studying in the corner booth. Danny moved between tables, refilling coffee, delivering plates, checking in. Her feet ached, but she didn't care. This was what it was supposed to feel like. Around 2 p.m., Lorraine arrived. Danny saw her mom step through the door, thin oxygen tank on a small cart, but smiling wider than Danny had seen in years. She rushed over, wrapping her arms around her. "Mama." "Look at you," Lorraine whispered, voice thick with pride. "Look at what you built." Danny's throat tightened. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad I got to see it." They sat together in a booth by the window. Danny brought her mom a slice of pecan pie and watched her take slow, savoring bites. Leon stopped by with his crew. Beverly's husband came in with their grandkids. Tomas brought friends from campus. The diner buzzed with life, laughter, conversation, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the griddle. Danny stood behind the counter, taking it all in. On the wall beside the register hung the framed photograph of Walt and Evelyn. She glanced at it, and for just a second, she swore she saw them smiling. Not at the camera. At her. She whispered, "Thank you." And somehow, in the warmth of that crowded diner, she felt them answer back. "You're welcome." By the 3rd week, something unexpected happened. People started leaving envelopes. Not just tips envelopes with cash, checks, notes, scribbled on folded paper. "For the next veteran who walks in. Keep feeding people who need it. In memory of my father, who served." Danny kept them in a box behind the register. By Friday, there was nearly $2,000 inside. A local reporter came by, wrote a small piece for the Knoxville News-Sentinel about the waitress who inherited a diner from a stranger and turned it into a haven for veterans. The story got picked up, shared. People drove from Chattanooga, Nashville, even as far as Atlanta just to eat there. Not for the food, though. Beverly's biscuits were legendary. For the feeling. That's what people said. "It just feels different here." Danny didn't know how to explain it, but she felt it too. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the door opened and a woman walked in. Mid-30s, brown hair pulled into a neat ponytail, nervous eyes scanning the room. Danny looked up from wiping down a table. The woman's gaze landed on the photograph of Walt and Evelyn on the wall. Her breath hitched. "Sarah?" Danny whispered. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Danny crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around her. Sarah broke. She sobbed into Danny's shoulder deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere old and buried. Danny held her, saying nothing, just holding on. When Sarah finally pulled back, her face was streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I had to meet you. I'm glad you came." They sat in the booth by the window. Danny poured 2 cups of coffee. For a while, neither spoke. Then Sarah said, "You gave me my dad back." Danny shook her head. "I just gave him soup." "No." Sarah's voice was firm. You gave him something he'd lost, something I didn't think he'd ever find again." She paused, wiping her eyes. "And now, look at this place. Look at what you're doing." Danny glanced around. Veterans sitting side by side with college kids. An older woman reading in the corner. A trucker laughing with Beverly at the counter. "You're not just feeding people," Sarah continued. "You're giving them what my dad gave you, a place to be seen." Danny's vision blurred. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." And in that moment, Donnie understood. Kindness didn't end, it multiplied. One bowl of soup, one conversation, one life touched. And now, hundreds. This is only the beginning. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. The last customer left at 9:45 p.m. Danny locked the door behind him, flipping the sign to "Closed." The diner settled into quiet, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the faint creak of old wood adjusting to the night. She moved through the space slowly, wiping down tables, stacking chairs, switching off lights one by one. It had been a long day, a good day. 17 veterans fed. A young mom with 2 kids who couldn't pay Danny sent them home with full bellies and a bag of leftovers. A trucker who left a $50 bill in the donation box with a note that just said, "Thank you." She paused at the booth by the window, the one where she and Sarah had sat just days ago, the one where her mom had eaten pecan pie on opening day, the one she imagined Walt and Evelyn might have sat in, dreaming about what this place could be. Danny slid into the seat, exhaling slowly. Her gaze drifted to the photograph on the wall, Walt in his army jacket, Evelyn in her yellow dress, both of them frozen in a moment of hope. "I hope I'm doing it right," she whispered. The photograph didn't answer, but somehow the silence felt warm. She thought about that night, the rain, the shivering old man under the streetlight, the soup she almost didn't give him. One choice, one moment. And it changed everything. Not just for her, for Sarah, for Lorraine, for every person who walked through these doors and felt seen. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. Soft, steady, familiar. Danny stood and walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The streetlights glowed golden through the drizzle. The old city market across the street was quiet, empty, peaceful. She smiled. The rain didn't scare her anymore. It reminded her of beginnings, of strangers becoming family, of kindness that traveled further than she ever imagined. She turned off the last light, grabbed her coat, and stepped outside. The cool October air wrapped around her. Rain kissed her face, gentle and kind. She locked the door, tested the handle twice, and stood there for a moment, looking at the sign above her. Danny's table. Not just a diner, a legacy, a promise kept. She walked toward her car, rain soaking into her shoes, and didn't mind at all. Because some storms weren't meant to be avoided. Some storms brought miracles. And sometimes, one small kindness could echo longer than a lifetime. If this story moved you, subscribe because kindness like this deserves to be remembered.